Welcome to the Real Estate Investment Hub, where you can learn how to grow, scale, and optimize your real estate portfolio through our conversations with investors and thought leaders in the real estate industry. Let's move on to the episode.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Real Estate Investment Hub. Today we have a good friend of ours, Chris Thomas, on of Tom's Investment Group. He's also a realtor out in Vancouver, and he does private equity as well. So we all know him as the most interesting man in Vancouver for sure. Chris, how are you?
Welcome.
Well, that's quite the introduction. There's been quite a bit of pressure on me here to perform, but no, thanks, Chris, for having me on board here in Rodby. Pleasure as well, and really appreciate this opportunity to come here and just share some insights with you guys.
Yeah, of course. So Chris is a big figure in the real estate space, has been in and around development as well for a very long time. Don't let the young face fool you, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, development, I guess you could say, has been running through my bloods from day one, right? I've been focused on it since a young age, and then obviously it was natural for me to get my real estate license because obviously of the development background, and it was just a seamless fit in that sense, right? And that's how life works sometimes, because each step transitions into the next step, right? So, and then it's just all about trying to merge them all together sometimes. And yeah.
No, that's amazing, Chris. So you've been pretty much in the development space all your life, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Walk us through that. How was that like growing up in that space? I'm
well,
sure quite
I mean,
interesting.
what it was very interesting, because that's what helped me develop my mindset from day one of, like, you always have to take risks, and you always have to kind of jump in the deep end sometimes, right? Because a lot of times it is sink or swim, right? Because truthfully, like, before we started all this, we were just doing our corporate jobs, 9 to 5. But then what we realized is all we're doing is just paying the bills and playing catch up. We're not actually achieving true financial freedom.
Right.
So the only way to achieve financial freedom was take a risk. So starting our own development company, and it was simple. Like, we're just building single family homes for ourselves and some of our family, and that was it, right? Like, baby steps, right? And then from there, we scaled it from single family homes to townhouses to condos to multifamily subdivisions. So yeah, I mean, it's been quite the journey.
Oh, I can imagine, especially with all the cycles that you and your family have been through, the real estate cycles, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're definitely exposed to the elements in that sense, right? I mean, but it's just like anything. There's good and there's bad, but the good is the fact that now, we have achieved that financial freedom. Like, I'm not constrained anymore, right? Because there is no glass ceiling in that sense. I was able to break the barriers and, quite frankly, just soar, right? So,
yeah, no, definitely. That's one of the great things about development and entrepreneurship in general, right? There's really no ceiling. Of course, there's a lot of risk that you have to take on, but that just comes with the territory.
Of course. I mean, risk and reward are synonymous, right? You can't achieve one without the other, right? And that's why it's not for everyone, because the fear of risk holds them back from the reward, right?
Absolutely.
And it's natural too, right? I'm not saying you should be afraid of risk in that sense, but if you don't try, you'll never succeed, right?
No, that's definitely true. Simply put, very well put. In terms of the risk in development, for the folks at home that are listening that are not super familiar with how that works, maybe you can share some insight on that.
Yeah, so obviously you have capital risk because you're investing millions of dollars into these developments, right? Not just the acquisition, but then also you have to fund the financing of the construction, right? It's like, it's not cheap to build houses,
No,
right?
definitely
Not at all.
Especially in Vancouver.
No, and
Not a chance.
you also have high holding costs, and also that you're subject to, like Rodby mentioned, the economy. Like, it just, there's different cycles, right? Sometimes you can go into a development project and everything could be going right in the economy, but by the time you get shovel in the ground, the entire
Everything
economy
changes.
could change, right?
Yeah.
So it's scary sometimes, but you know what? Like, you're always going to face rough waters, but as long as you properly plan for everything, you can manage it.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. With any kind of business, even with the development, there are challenges you will face. As long as you're aware of how to manage it, then you should be okay in the long run. on that point, in terms of development, how is the timeline like? I know a lot of our viewers are interested to learn more about the process itself. Let's say from purchasing the lot all the way to actually selling the built product to a consumer.
Well, that's a really great question. I'm happy you brought that up, Rodby. So basically, the development process is an extremely long process, to say the least, because a property acquisition could take, let's say, 3 months, right, just for you to close, right?
Yeah.
And then that's step one, close on the property. Then from there, you actually have to get your permits in place and all that stuff. Depending on the municipality, sometimes it could take up to 6 to 12 months just to get
6 to 12
a
months.
building permit, right? And
would this be for like a smaller scale development?
Correct, for a single family. But if you're talking about multifamily, like, apartments, condos, townhomes, you could be looking at up to 2 years sometimes.
Wow.
It's a long time.
So you're just paying holding costs until then.
Correct. So, and especially in an environment like this with high rates, your holding costs are very, very high, right? So,
I can imagine.
and that creates a big issue because if you're taking 6 to 12 months just to get your shovel in the ground, it's going to take you another 1 to 2 years to build something on there too, depending on what the development is. So all of a sudden, you're looking at a 3-year timeline before you can even get one building up.
Wow.
Okay. So something that I've always been very interested in is what do you do from acquisition all the way to shovels in the ground? Like, is there kind of like a revenue play of like, how do we pay these carrying costs? Is this simply just finding something that already has a tenant in place?
Yeah.
Or is it having cash in the bank and just being able to ride it out?
I would say it's a mixture of all avenues, right? Usually on the real estate side, you would want to have a slightly longer completion, right? So that would help offset the holding costs right there. And then you would want to structure the contract so that you could actually begin some of the work that needs to be done to get the permits in place, right? So then that way you're already kind of getting the ball rolling before you even complete on the property, right? So that's step one of trying to reduce some of the holding costs. And in a lot of instances for a single family home, if you could get a 4 to 6 month close, you could actually get all the groundwork done. And then by the time you close on the property, you'll be ready to have shovel on the ground.
So you can go to city and you can start work even without being the registered owner.
Correct. You would just have to be an authorized representative of the owner. So then the owner would just have to sign off on that. So yeah.
I guess that's why land assemblies are usually 1 to 2 year closes then.
Correct.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And in other scenarios, I mean, just find ways to service the debt, right? Because you're not always going to get the luxury of a 6 month close. Sometimes you might have to close sooner. Right?
It's true.
Each property is different. Each case is different, right? So you just evaluate accordingly. But you could always rent the property out.
It's true.
Get some rental income that will hopefully service your debt or a portion of your debt. And other than that, you just try to find different opportunities and be prepared to also fund it out of your own pocket too if you have to, right?
Yeah.
So,
Worst case scenario, I guess, is to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you always got to go into everything with a worst case scenario mentality, right? So
I feel like a lot of developers may have not been doing that over like the last few years since COVID because especially in Toronto, I'm seeing so many projects being canceled. I think it was like 60 plus projects being canceled. In Vancouver, where we're seeing a lot more right now with a lot of people assigning their lots or a lot of people just, even for pre-sale buyers, just people that are just selling their assignments at a huge loss too. So I feel like traditionally, everyone was supposed to mitigate that risk, but unfortunately, in the last few years, people just kind of went in on a contract and they didn't really think about it.
Yeah, I mean, development's definitely not like a get-rich-quick scheme like it may seem to some people, and it's not definitely a sure thing either. Like, it's far from it. And like you said, developers have been forfeiting projects or canceling projects just because the economics don't make sense. And sometimes when the economics just don't make sense, you just have to stop the bleeding, right?
Yeah.
By just cutting it off completely, right? Because otherwise you're really, really going to hurt yourself if you go forward with the project.
Bigger loss than just ending it there.
Correct. Sometimes you're just going to have to cut your losses, and that's that, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Chris, would you say that aside from like interest rates soaring, that what one of the biggest kind of downfalls right now in development is all the red tape from the government too? Because you were saying that right now we might look between a 6 month to 2 year time frame just to get permitting, just to get shovels on the ground.
Yeah, so I would say the housing supply right now is like the housing crisis is because we have a lack of supply right now, right?
Yeah.
The municipalities are not moving fast enough. Like if you're taking 6 to 12 months just to issue a building permit, that's a long time, like, you know?
Massive.
And you look at it, I don't know what the exact stats for immigration is, but it's growing at a record pace right now, right? And people are reproducing like at fast rates now too, right? The population is just growing endlessly. Like it's almost an infinite loop right now, right? So the problem is if you are taking up to 2 years just to build some sort of housing supply, that's not going to be able to keep up with the demand from all these people that need homes to live in, right? And that's the problem with our housing crisis right now. There's too many people and too little houses.
Yeah, I think not just that, but the rate that we're going now, it's not even enough to make it
Make a dent.
basically net zero, right? We're net negative because the pace that we're going at right now in terms of building, it's not nearly enough to be able to accommodate the population growth.
Have you guys seen the stat where the I don't remember exactly how many houses like Canada wants to build. It's obviously in the millions, right? From now until like 2030 or so. And then when people broke it down, it was about 60 homes per hour for like the next 7 years or something along those lines. And Chris is laughing because obviously that's not going to work.
Yeah.
And of course this includes rental. Like this includes peer rental. This includes condos, and so it's not just single family homes. But still, 60 homes per hour across Canada is for the next 7 years is not possible.
It's not going to happen.
Not even close.
Well, the other thing is there's also high development cost charges that are administered by the city too, right? And that's another constraint that these developers face because it's actually increasing rather than decreasing. So it's becoming more and more expensive for developers to build. So quite frankly, Vancouver's not a very development-friendly city.
Not at all.
It's actually far from it. And there's other cities, other municipalities that are actually taking measures to encourage more development by slashing their DCCs and speeding up permitting times, all that stuff. And that's what's going to make a difference between seeing an influx of development hitting one area moving forward.
And which cities do you think are slashing right now?
Surrey.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. But Langley is increasing, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, from what I saw.
Yeah. So Surrey, for example, they're rapidly growing. They are trying to be the downtown of the Fraser Valley, right? And it has to happen because, quite frankly, it's not going to be economical for people to live in places like Abbotsford or even Chilliwack and transit to Vancouver for work, right? No.
Doesn't make any sense.
So Surrey is actually slashing their development cost charges. They're trying to speed up permitting times. They're actually offering guaranteed permitting. So like it says that you will get a permit within X amount of time, right?
As long as it aligns with the OCP,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. So
amazing.
So that's what's happening right now, and those are some measures that are being taken by that particular municipality to encourage development and speed up processing times. But even that alone is still not going to be enough to solve the housing crisis, right? What you're starting to see now is some of these cities, like they're going to start incorporating artificial intelligence to help speed up these permitting timelines because human capital is human capital. People can only work at a certain amount of pace, whatever, right? And incentive is a big thing too, right? Like these plan checkers, they don't get paid a commission, you know? So they're not necessarily incentivized well enough to speed up housing permits and all that stuff, right? So, yeah.
So what would be the effect for the folks at home that aren't quite familiar with this topic whenever you increase the DCCs, the development costs, or you reduce them? How does that transfer to everyone else that's involved in the process?
Well, the best way to see it is it's a trickle-down effect, right? Because the higher the DCCs, then that means the more the developer would incur in development charges, right? And in terms of their overall build. And guess who ends up paying for that in the end? The end consumer.
That's
because the developer's margins are always based off what their costs are, right? So if their costs have gone higher, then they need to charge more. But if their costs are lower, then they could theoretically charge a little less.
Right. I wonder why these municipalities are increasing the DCCs then,
Because you're greedy.
especially in a housing crisis, right? It doesn't make sense.
Money is hard to come by, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these DCCs are a great source of revenue for these cities and things like that too, right? So that's what it is. But if you go travel to other parts of the world, you will notice like how much faster it is to put a building in the sky.
Significant.
Like, for example, if you were to go back to China, I'm sure you could put a high rise in the sky by tomorrow as long as you got the money in the bank.
Seriously,
right?
like you could put a bridge together tomorrow,
Yeah.
right? You just pay the right people, and you're good to go. Mexico is the same way.
Absolutely.
It's really anywhere but Vancouver.
Yeah, well, I would just say North America in
Yeah.
general, because
Yeah.
North America is ultra conservative in terms of this stuff. Like, and they don't necessarily innovate, right? We don't move fast. There is no urgency here. Whereas if you go to Asia, like it's innovation.
The
urgency.
infrastructure is
is crazy. So
Just look at our Massey Tunnel, and that's already that's all we need to say, right?
It's all politics here, right? Because everything is subject to election cycles. Like certain projects are funded by certain governments, and then it may not be on the agenda for the next government. And then going back to the Massey Tunnel, because that was supposed to be a liberal funded project, they were going to go do the bridge, but then the NDP came in and said, no, we don't want a bridge. We want to do a tunnel. But now the
We're back
next
to a
election
bridge.
is coming up very soon, and the Liberals still wanted to do a bridge. So is the Massey Tunnel going to be another pawn in the overall play there?
Probably.
Probably, right? So it's funny and it's kind of sad how this works. But once again, it all goes down to politics, right? So politics is definitely something that's very, very important, especially for all of us too,
Oh no,
right? So,
absolutely. Always seems like an endless back and forth, right?
It's sad.
yeah. I mean, and it's quite frankly, like the direction this country's going in right now is probably not the best direction because obviously the pandemic didn't help. The deficit's at an all-time high. Like, and it's just an absolute crisis, right? And
Really is.
It's going to be rough times coming up for sure.
A little bit sad. Chris and I were joking in a previous episode how we're always the bearer of bad news. Maybe we can share some good news with our audience now. What are some of the projects that you guys are working on?
Yeah, so I have a 6-story condo site out in Fleetwood that I'm working on right now. So that one is like basically on Fraser and 168. It's a beautiful project.
Great area.
Walking distance to the
it's
future SkyTrain.
you're like within 1 kilometer of the 166 SkyTrain station, and the entire Fleetwood area is blowing up,
It's
right?
booming, yeah.
It's just basically like the trickle down from Surrey Center, like, you know.
Oh yeah.
Everyone saw what happened to Surrey Center. Now, basically, that's what's going to happen to Fleetwood, right? And then Fleetwood also has this proximity to Langley, too, so that's huge as well, right? And that's actually a game-changing development, the fact that there's a SkyTrain running all the way across Fraser Highway, right? It creates unprecedented connectivity here in the Fraser Valley. And for my project in particular, to be situated right next to a game-changing infrastructure development like that is huge, right? I mean, who doesn't love living right next to SkyTrain, right?
Exactly.
And nowadays, all these communities are being built around the SkyTrain, right? It's like almost like it's mini little town center, right?
Yeah.
Like you can go grocery shopping, you can go to your favorite restaurant, and like everything's right there. So walk away, right? It's you don't even need a car anymore half the time, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, amazing. With the recent policy changes with the transit-oriented developments, did that affect that project at all?
Yeah, no. So we definitely benefited from that. So, hey, we're talking about some good news. now.
yeah.
So our density actually increased because of the transit-oriented development policy. So originally we were getting roughly about 2.5 FSR, right, which is basically the multiplier that you use to determine your buildable. But then with the transit-oriented development, that increased to 3.0.
Wow.
So
huge.
Quite significant change there.
Yeah.
So, Chris, just to backtrack a little bit for the people at home, if let's say we have a 1,000 square foot lot and we have a 2.5 FSR, what does that really mean?
that basically means you could take that 1,000 and times it by 2.5, and that would be your buildable right there.
So with the density increase, you now have an extra 500 square foot of buildable, which
correct.
means that you can bring more housing to market and really help the supply.
Absolutely,
crisis.
right? Like because in a condo project like that, that makes a big difference because you're
Huge.
adding units, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like anytime you can add an extra 10 to 20 units, that's another 10 to 20 families that have potential homes.
Mm-hmm.
And quite frankly, 10 to 20 extra units is not really going to make a big change in the overall market, but it's things like that, if it's done collectively, that can start making a positive change, right? One development alone won't make a difference, but if all developments take these kind of initiatives, then that's how you start to create more homes for more people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Chris, we're actually I think what one of our friends is building a rental building. I think Hans is building a rental building, so something along those lines. So it seems like there is a shift towards just purpose-built rental. So with the building that you guys are building right now, have you guys considered maybe switching over to purpose-built? Like, what would be really the play as opposed to pre-selling all the units?
So basically how a purpose-built rental works is then you can actually access CMHC's funds. And what CMHC does is it actually is a development program that's development friendly. Like, it allows you to access capital in the form of a loan at very low interest rates, right? And you also have very long terms, right? And flexible payment structures. Like, it's stuff that you would never get from a bank. A bank is structured for you to default half the time, right? Sadly. But so these CMHC purpose-built rentals are very development friendly, and that's why a lot of developers are doing it. And then the rental income they get just becomes cash flow for them, right? And then you can convert it to market residential at a later date.
Oh, okay. Do you know how long you need to hold it for?
It depends, but usually it's about a few years. Yeah.
Got it. So if, let's say, somebody were to do purpose-built rental, would one of the potential plays to be to refinance later on? Like, let's say 10, 15 years down the line, refinance, take the initial cash out, and then do it all over again?
Correct, yeah, because what's going to happen is you're eventually going to have to refi the CMHC loan because there is a term to it as well. So at the end of the term, you'll want to refi it. But what's going to happen is by then you should have quite a bit of equity in it, and everything you have been paying up to that point has been going primarily towards your principal
because of the low rate.
Because of the low rates. Whereas with a bank loan, you would pay very little to no principal in, let's say, a term of 5 years.
Okay.
Mostly interest.
Yeah.
That's actually a great way to incentivize developers to add more rental supply to the market.
It's a lot more compelling than just pre-selling, I think.
Yeah, and it takes away the risk of, let's say, the economy changing, right? Let's say you go into this development and you're saying, okay, I'm going to get $1,000 a square foot. That's what my sellable is going to be. But then you go in, market changes, you're only selling for $900 a square foot. That really changes your margins entirely, right? Really and let's say if your building costs have actually gone up higher than expected and your selling costs are going lower, that's not a really good ratio right there. So, and that's why, as Chris mentioned, a lot of developers are canceling projects because the economics aren't there. But these rental programs allow you to create economic-friendly situations for developers to build homes. And it solves the problem of, housing, right? Because people will still have houses to live in because developers are still building.
That's true. No, it really incentivize developers to help with everyone's mission of adding to the housing supply, rental supply. And there are also there are other policies too that they've changed to incentivize them
like the
further.
GST.
The GST. Yeah, so that's great.
Yeah, I mean, the government's definitely stepping up and trying to make some sort of measures to encourage development because they're not stupid, right? Like,
Definitely not.
They recognize you need developers to keep building, and you have to give them the necessary tools to do so, right? Because the developers are the ones that's going to be building all the homes, right? It's not going to be Justin Trudeau necessarily, right?
No.
So,
No, that's true.
There was a photo of him holding a hammer backwards.
that explains a lot.
Sorry, he's building his own homes, isn't he?
Seriously.
No.
Just hammering it backwards.
That's too funny.
Yeah,
That's too funny.
Kind of speaks volumes of how he's running the country too, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different topic right there.
Topic for another day, my friend.
Yeah, no. So there's a lot of different projects like that going on. And then beyond my Fleetwood project, I also have a very intriguing project out in
in Chilliwack, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
one.
so
The
that one
mountainside.
it's a beautiful project. Like basically, it's almost unprecedented. Like you've never seen a development like this in the Lower Mainland. It's almost something you'd associate as like a vacation home. It's located in the eastern hillsides of Chilliwack. It's on top of a mountainside, but then basically you have unprecedented views of the entire Fraser Valley region while bordering a luxurious golf course owned by the Aquilini family themselves. So
That's amazing.
yeah, that one, it's going to be a multi-phase development, but phase one, we're doing 90 lots.
90. Wow.
90 lots.
Yeah.
Overall,
That's amazing.
how many lots are you estimating? to be?
Right now, it's going to be about a 4-phase development with the parcel that we have, but I'm actually acquiring subsequent parcels of land too. But each phase, you're looking at about 90.
Ooh,
So
wow.
90 times 4. And then that doesn't include the other parcels that I acquire. So,
And those will be around 90 as well. Wow, that's
Yeah.
going to be massive.
yeah. So,
Super exciting.
yeah, so basically just imagine like, you have a golf course right next to you and you're on top of a mountain with unobstructed views of the entire Fraser Valley, and it's just gorgeous. And for those that are not familiar with Chilliwack is just a beautiful place because it's nestled in nature, right? So, yeah.
And these are townhouses.
It's going to be a combination of townhomes, single-family homes, and each phase will kind of determine which appropriate form of housing we need. But the
Gotcha.
first phase will be more single-family homes, and some homes that are like, more like 8 to 10,000 square feet. We'll have some houses with acreages, like that kind of stuff. Like,
Massive.
Yeah.
I actually want to use everything that Chris just said to highlight something that I don't think people at home really understand. And that is, if Chris has this parcel of land in Chilliwack, it's not necessarily that he can build up to those property lines for residential. Chris, do you mind highlighting if you were to build, let's say, 90 lots per unit or per plot that you have there? What would the city actually want from you in return? Like, do they need you to build infrastructure or give them roads, easements, anything like that?
Yeah, so basically the city would want us to basically create infrastructure, right? So there is existing infrastructure in the form of like electricity, water, all that, because there's neighboring developments, right? So we could theoretically just pull that from those developments. But because of the nature of the land itself, because it's situated on a mountain, there's a lot of trees, like, you'd have to create road networks. You would have to create that kind of civil infrastructure there, right? So there's a lot of stuff that the city would need from us. Like they would need us to clear the entire land, get rid of all the trees. They would need us to plant new trees, landscaping, like all that kind of stuff, like create road networks. Like imagine building a brand new community from
It's like building
scratch.
a town. Yeah,
Exactly. You're building your own
literally.
town.
Yeah, Chris's town.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So it's definitely not your average like single family development, like, where you just go and, hold a hammer backwards and build a house.
Yeah.
Would you call that like a master plan community then?
Yeah.
Very master
It's
plan,
a
yeah.
master plan community for sure in that sense.
And do you need to build schools, community centers, anything like that?
No, because there's existing schools there. But
Oh.
usually, like, because in a development like this, they would require some sort of community contributions,
Like with
right?
Fraser Mills? Yeah.
Because there has to be schools within a certain amount of distance, and anytime you're introducing that much supply, that's going to be young families moving in there too. So that's why the cities always want schools and community centers, all that kind of stuff there, because those are community services, right? And it's up to the developer to pay for that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like the infrastructure part of the project seems significantly more difficult than actually just building the houses.
Honestly, building's the easy part.
Yeah. No, it makes sense.
Literally, it's just shoveled to the ground, but it's just all the back and forth, the talks with the city, the permitting, like that will make you age like 10 years, right?
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
A lot of back and forth. So in terms of timeline, I'm guessing you've already started with the discussion with the city and all the permitting stuff. How far along are you from getting started?
Yeah, so I should have my PLA by hopefully the summer, and then the PLA basically outlines everything that I need moving forward to actually get my permits. So if all goes well, within the next less than 2 years, I should be able to have
Wow.
everything.
Shovels on the ground.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Amazing.
very quick, actually.
Yeah.
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 For a
Yeah.
project that size, right?
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
Exactly. As you mentioned earlier.
And I would say 2 years is on the longer side too. So
Really?
Mm.
yeah.
Okay.
Because by summer I'll have my PLA, and then from there it's just about actually beginning the lot process and everything like that. So yeah, probably no longer than a year in that sense.
That's super exciting. Chris and I are really excited for you and your family. It sounds like an amazing project.
Yeah.
That's like a legacy town. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a big project. It's probably the biggest one that I've undertaken, and quite frankly, it's a fun project too.
Oh, I can imagine.
And
All the moving
I don't know,
parts.
I might just move there myself, practice my golf swing.
Yeah, we'll make for sure to
I
visit
mean, if you do, then the next one's going to have to be on Zoom because that's kind of far.
Yeah.
So besides the development side of things, you're also in private equity.
Correct. Yeah. So
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's kind of going back to like what I said before of like how one thing leads to another, right? So me being in real estate, I kind of got exposed to the whole venture capital, private equity field, and then from there, I decided to kind of take more of a, in-depth try at venture capital and private equity, right? So I've been transitioning towards that, and it's been a lot of fun, but it's been a completely different world from what I'm used to too. So it's fun too because there is a lot of overlap too, right? So it's just another day, but same kind of challenge, right?
Right. You seem like someone that loves challenges.
I mean, challenges are what helps you grow, right? Because if at the end of the day, we always need to have like these kind of milestones, these challenges that we need to overcome in order to keep progressing in life, because the goal is progression rather than stagnation, right? So
100%.
always move forward, never backwards.
Yeah. No,
That's
absolutely.
beautiful.
In terms of the private equity side of things, can you tell us about some of the things that you're involved with in that?
Yeah, so we focus
industry?
on a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and then what we do is we usually take different companies and take them public, all that kind of stuff, right? So under my watch, we have had multiple acquisitions. Like we just closed on a few beverage deals. So I have a mocktail line, and then acquired another beverage company just the other day. And then beyond that, we have some artificial intelligence. We have a gaming company. We have a lot of different
Wow. Very diverse.
categories in that sense. Yeah.
Are there any real estate plays that you're...
We are working on some real estate plays, actually. So there's one guy I'm talking to. He's got a large property out in Tulum, actually.
Okay.
And we're looking to possibly do some sort of merger on the public side with that, too. So that would
Very
be
cool.
a very exciting one, too. And then,
Amazing. We were just interviewing our friend Lev Makievsky.
In Tulum, yeah.
He's out there too.
Tulum is a beautiful
It's a
place.
booming town.
It is.
It's booming, and especially with that train coming there, too. Like,
There's actually a
Flying
lot more
train.
than a train now. I think
Yeah.
the
Airport.
one of the mayor candidates, he was saying that I guess it's basically it's another election play, right? It's like if I were to get elected, then he's saying that he's going to add a significant amount of road work and a ton of infrastructure on top of it. So it's a ton of infrastructure. There's railways. There's of course the new airport that I believe is a bit delayed. And then there's the Maya train as well. So
There's
it's
a l-
basically going from dirt roads to everything within the next decade.
Well, that's usually where like you see like all this influx of appreciation, right? Because there's so much capital infrastructure being invested into an area, right? How does it not appreciate, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
throwing like billions of dollars into this one particular pocket, right? Of course there will be some sort of appreciation there, right?
Forcing the appreciation in a way.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really want to make money, you got to follow the money. Yeah.
No, that's a phrase that I've heard many times from
Yep.
Chris. You now as well. Seems to be the case for...
He's actually the one I heard it from.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, just to like, for our viewers back home, like just put it in perspective. A place like Surrey, for example, right? Surrey for the longest time was seen as an afterthought, right? But then there's been billions of dollars that just been spent on infrastructure developments such as the train and things like that. That's really forcing a lot of appreciation in this particular area. And now it's trickling over to places like Langley, for example. Langley, if someone said they want to put a tower in the sky 10 years ago, you would have said, what are you smoking,
Impossible,
right?
yeah.
Like, so now Langley's got towers coming up left, right, and center, right? And that's what's going to drive up the appreciation here, because once these towers hit the sky, it's going to become a more desirable area. And the more desirable it is, the more expensive it gets to live.
Absolutely. Definitely brings a lot more people
Correct.
into the city with all the projects coming in.
Absolutely. And this is how you start to see the landscapes of these cities absolutely transform, right? Langley for a long time was just basically farmland, right?
Yeah, it's true.
So now it's going to be a concrete jungle.
Yeah, no, it's on the way there with
Yeah.
all the high rises. I think the first one they had here was called Latimer Heights.
Yeah,
Latimer
the
Heights.
towers, yeah.
The two towers.
Yeah, it's
And I
just
think there's
right
a
across
couple
the road
more
here.
coming now.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful project, and there's a lot more projects off that scale coming here too. But it's pretty crazy because if I remember correctly, the Latimer Towers sold out in like 48
Instant.
hours,
Oh, yeah.
right?
There were
Like,
people lining
was
up.
there.
There were people like sleeping
Yeah,
in tents. Yeah.
It's just because people were so excited over a high rise coming in Langley, because it was
the
like
first one.
it's the first one, and it was almost like an impossible situation that turned into a possible situation, because no one would have ever seen that coming 5 to 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's just crazy how things can change in the snap of a finger like that, right? So,
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, it's very exciting, the world of development. So let me ask you, Chris, for people that want to get into development, what are some pieces of advice that you can share with them to get the ball rolling? in that
Yeah,
sense?
so that's a really good question. I mean, the biggest piece of advice I can give anyone is don't be afraid to fail, right? Because it all comes from your mindset, right? Obviously, with development, you'd want to hang out with developers and learn the trade one by one from there. But before you can even see any sort of success with development, it all starts from within, right? Your mindset will really determine your success. So you are going to crash and burn sometimes, and that's totally okay. But you just have to get back up and keep moving forward, right? Because that's the biggest thing. That's my biggest piece of advice, because if you can't succeed internally, you'll never succeed externally.
No, those are sound words.
That's a
wise
clip right
words
there.
from a wise man. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Chris, if the folks want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm always available, but myself, my phone number's all over the internet there. I'm quite the celebrity, right? So, I mean, I'm always one phone call away, right? So, and then, sometimes I'm just hanging out with Chris here too. So, whenever Chris is, I might be there too.
Count me in for that. Sounds like fun.
Oh, yeah, it's a great time.
Well, there you have it, folks. Thank you, Chris, so much for joining us today and telling us a bit about the development scene here in Vancouver.
That was amazing.
Definitely learned a lot.
Yeah.
Would love to have you back at some point.
Yeah, no,
again.
absolutely, gentlemen. It's a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for having me on here. It's a privilege.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There you have it, folks.
All right. See you next time. And that wraps up this episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you like the episode, leave a review and follow our socials linked in the episode description. Make sure you share this episode with someone you think would get value from this podcast. We'll see you next time.